It's not necessarily designed for us to succeed, despite the images and the people who have been successful who may look like us or represent us in some way. What then says to you, or what made you choose to even go to therapy, right? Because with a lot of people in those communities, they may say, you know what, I don't trust anybody, who's going to be telling me on the other side of the couch that this is what you should do. Or, that's something that we just keep to ourselves and say, I got it, I'm good, I'm going to deal with it on my own. So what made you even go that route?
It's a good question, but I think what made me go that route is that there were people who provided that service to me. So, first of all, there is a program in New York that still exists, the Hetrick-Martin Institute, that I did go to. And there I received a counselor, and his name was Manuel. I'll withhold his last name, but his name was Manuel, and he was a Puerto Rican man, and he really helped me to understand that side of myself. And most of the kids that came, for people who didn't know, Hetrick-Martin Institute it still operates in New York, a program for LGBT youth.
Okay.
And the majority of the youth that they were servicing at that time were people of color, were Black and Puerto Ricans. We were from Harlem, the Bronx, we were from Brooklyn. We couldn't live in Greenwich Village because that area, just the market real estate was that most of us didn't live there. But we came from other areas of the city to go to HMI and get the services, and you had to have a counselor in order to receive any services there. And that's how I got exposed to therapy. But simultaneously, the school I went to, Martin Luther King High School, I got involved with a white woman therapist, and Miss Spiro was her name, and she was awesome to my development. So I started to express myself, talk about these things, talked about what it was like to be gay in Bushwick and Black in Greenwich Village, all of that stuff. And I said, I could do this one day.
The light went on, like,
Yes.
That's I love it.
I mean, in a way, I don't know who I would be if I wasn't receiving that care.
Yeah, and you saw the value in it. You saw how helpful it was for you struggling to make sense of all these different identities, and said, how can I help others? That's what I'm hearing you say.
Absolutely. I mean, I went to Philippa Duke Schuyler Middle School in Brooklyn, also in Bushwick, and they had the motto, to whom much is given, much is required. And so I guess it kind of connected there that, if I felt I had talent within me to educate myself, then something is required of me. And that requirement is that I help heal people, because somebody has given something to me. Somebody's healed me or helped heal me. So I must help heal other people.
And that's what connection is all about, right? Like, how do I use my story and my pain to help others through their stuff? Because when you think about it, how many people out there, how many kids are out there, how many, kids in the LGBT community, in the African American community, and brown communities, and, pick any minority, are out there suffering in silence. And how do we help them have a voice?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you what also strengthened my resolve to do this work is my years that I lived in Atlanta. And when I first got there, of course, now I lived in Florida first, and then I moved to Atlanta after finishing at FIU. I saw just a number of young black gay men on the street, basically selling themselves. And I just was so saddened by that because there's a profound sense of loss, I believe. Maybe I don't want to be judgmental about people who are sex workers, but it just feels like there was such a profound sense of loss for people who had to do that, who felt they had to do that. And maybe they were runaways. And this was nothing that was unknown to me, because even in the village on the pier, if you know what the pier is, there were a lot of people who were homeless. Some of my friends were living in group homes.
Mm-hmm. They talk a lot about the pier in Pose, right?
Yes, in Pose, the real pier, not the Pose.
right, not the Hollywood pier.
And to be honest with you, not the pier that is there now, because the pier is actually still there, but they have gentrified it. It is policed. Wow. Now, you can't do the thing. I mean, maybe you don't want what was going on back then to go on now, but even Greenwich Village has become a policed space for people of color. But all of this is to say that the loss of innocence, the loss of a self-actualized life, as Maslow would say, just seemed profoundly lost on a lot of people around me, and certainly parts of that must have been chipping off in me. So family also was a saving grace.
How is that for you?
Well, I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing in my family to come out, but it wasn't the hardest thing either, because I felt that my family did care about me, and so that means a lot right there, because some people don't have that.
Correct.
And that loss from your family, from where you come from, is so profound in so many people that's why I saw people I think a lot of people on Cypress Street. That's what we called it in Atlanta. That was the place where, back then there were sex workers. Many of them probably were from Alabama or surrounding Georgia counties or from surrounding states, because they've lost their families. Their families didn't, want nothing to do with them anymore.
So what would you say to somebody in that situation? Because you're absolutely right. When you see a sex worker like that on the street, there has to be some sort of core wound and trauma. That would be my guess. And again, that desire to find themselves, and some find themselves through just, putting their bodies out there. And so that's their process. But what do you say to somebody in that situation? Like, maybe they don't have a family who supports them.
Well, we're back to the concept of you deal, right? You deal. And you start to ignore the parts of yourself that you lose along the way, that you chip away, that chips away at you. Because if you sit down and start entertaining that, you start to not deal.
Right.
So I think a lot of people ignore it until it erodes them in such a way that they can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, it just makes me think that, like, even in this culture of reality TV, for instance, I don't know why that just came to mind. Well, somebody in particular came to mind. She is a rapper. She's done a lot of work on her face. I won't name her.
I don't know who that is. I don't nobody anymore. But like after TLC and them in the 90s, I then gave up.
Right. Well, you know who I'm talking about. But anyway, but it reminds me of like that whole concept of trying to find yourself by making these external changes, by appearing to be somebody you are. But really, when you look inside, you know that there's still something missing. Right? And how do you get back to the core of that?
Damon, I don't know that you do. You just become changed. Now, if you're talking about getting back to some level of peace, some level of inner resolve, that's another process. But to get back to where you were, I don't know that you can get back to.
Well, and maybe that's the question then, is it, do we even want to get back to where we were, or how do we then, from that place of not being in peace, so there's a lot of inner turmoil and conflict going on clearly with somebody in that situation, and they may deny it, right? They may say, oh, well, it's somebody else's issue, or, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm good with how I feel, how I look. I've dealt with all the stuff that's happened in my past, when in reality, there has to be some stuff there, right? It's going to manifest itself either emotionally, physically, whatever. But how do you then, from there, create a new space of peace? How do you do that?
Here is a good question, right? For me, it was years of therapy.
Got it.
It was years of self-exploration. It was making sense of Bushwick. Not the old one and the new one. I didn't even know if it's ever going to be a new one.
But but that I was just talking to somebody the other day about trauma and loss. Sorry to cut you off, but sometimes we have this thought that we should get over it, or it's what were we talking about, like a new normal or something? But I don't think it's that. I think it's more about how do you integrate the past with the present, and so that you can change your future. I think it's all about integration.
Yes, because, again, let's go back to the way in the very beginning of this conversation, what I was talking about was being immersed into an issue. I actually was born in Bed-Stuy, which is very rough too. So I was immersed in Black ghetto. Mm-hmm. Okay? So how do you go back to something you never had? Peace. You understand?
Right.
So only thing you can do is look at what you've been given. As people will say, the cards you've been dealt.
Correct.
And say, if this is insufficient for me, these cards I have in my hand, how can I either transform them, find a way to get new cards, or do something different than what has been given to me. Maybe I need to throw some of these cards away.
Yeah, who says I need to even hold on to them? Maybe I can just throw them all out and get a new deck.
Right. So you might have to create your own. Here's a radical thought. You might have to create your own sense of loss. You may have to actually lose things.
So what you're saying is you may have to lose things in order to gain and be even stronger.
I would have to lose the idea that I could never live in those apartments in Greenwich Village. Can I do that? Can I lose the idea that what I was born in is all I'm ever going to be? I had to lose that in order to be a psychologist. Get out of the area. To even go from New York to Florida, I had to change something in my mentality.
Something had to.
Well, my mother moved, but
but you always had a choice.
I had no money to move to Florida, but I had to change into a different person and risk being somewhere else. Risk being different somewhere else. Risk letting a new self emerge. Miami changed me. Atlanta changed me. DC changed me. And even going back to New York changed me. You have to be willing to lose some part of yourself that I don't know, maybe not working for you anymore, but you have to embrace the future and what's to come.
Man, so yeah, couple things that are really standing out about this. A, you have to do the work, and you have to be willing to do the work.
Absolutely.
B, you have to be willing to be in a space of fear in order to create.
I'm sitting with that one.
Right? Because I'm guessing there had to be some fear of
absolutely
of leaving something that was familiar. Just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's good for you.
I understand. Yeah. Fear is definitely a motivator. Change. You're yes. Because there's many thoughts. Fear is a topic that can be just all by itself.
Right. We can go down all sorts of